How do our iodine levels impact our thyroid health? In this episode, you're going to learn all about thyroid health. You're going to learn what causes thyroid issues like hypothyroidism, how you can prevent them from happening, and how to reverse them if they do. Dr. Alan Christianson is a board-certified naturopathic endocrinologist focusing on thyroid care. He's a New York Times bestselling author whose recent title is The Thyroid Reset Diet. For now, it's time to get closer and closer to your best you with the one and only Dr. Alan Christianson. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I am super excited to be joined by Dr. Alan Christianson. Dr. Christianson, I know that thyroid health for me personally is not something that I've really had a whole lot of education on, but I know that a lot of people have issues with their thyroid, and I know it can play such a big impact, oftentimes negatively in people's health and fitness journeys. And so I'm excited to learn more about it today. I know a lot of people are probably feeling a pretty similar way because I know it can lead to things like weight gain, fatigue, hair loss, and other symptoms and stuff like that. So let's just kind of start off with the basics of what purpose does the thyroid hormone serve in our body?
Yeah, awesome question, Nick. Thanks for having me. So three big things, putting out energy, repairing tissues, and allowing nerves to communicate. So if it's not working right, those core things work badly. You mentioned about weight gain. That's kind of like two sides of a coin. If energy doesn't come out, it stays stuck. It stays stuck in the form of fat. So you're tired and you can't really maintain body weight. And then tissue repair. You mentioned hair. Yeah, tendons, ligaments, skin, nails, muscles, they're all affected by that. And then nerve conduction. So your mood, your energy, how well you manage your emotions, they're all centrally governed by your thyroid health.
And so from doing my little bit of research and education and leading up to this interview, it seems like everybody, to an extent, like thyroid health is a little bit genetic. And so everybody's basically ability to do all of these things is somewhat based off their genetics. And I know that basically everyone's bodies are different with their ability to oxidize ion and the amount of ion that they can actually store. So talk to us a little bit about the role that iodine plays, in our thyroid health.
Yeah, you're spot on right. So it's pretty much genetic. You know, if you're an identical twin and your twin has thyroid disease, you got like a 69% chance of getting it. But the genes that cause it are genes that regulate iodine. So iodine is something that we need. It's in every food you can imagine. Thankfully, we don't really get the severe deficiencies that happened in past times of history, but the genes that make someone prone to thyroid disease are genes that make them really struggle if they get even a little above what they require. Kind of an odd paradox. You know, most nutrients like vitamin C or something, you can have too little, but too much is not a realistic danger for most people. But iodine is very different. There's a narrow window between healthy amounts and then too much for some people. And we think this is one of the biggest reasons why thyroid disease has skyrocketed. You know, many types have gone up threefold in the last few decades. Globally, thyroid medications are among the top 2 or 3 most widely prescribed medications. That's been the case for several decades. So this is a rampant thing.
So like you said, it's a very narrow window with regards to how much is too much, what's too little. It's kind of a narrow window. What are the different reasons why, like you said, there are a lot of increases in thyroid issues? Is it because of our diet? Is it because of our lifestyle? Like, what are some of the biggest reasons why it's becoming harder and harder for us to find that balance of not too much, not too little?
Yeah, that's the thing, and it's kind of odd to think about a disease that's largely genetic, that the rates are changing. I mean, our gene pool hasn't, right? But yeah, genes do different things in different circumstances. And what happens is that the minimal amounts are pretty much set from person to person, but the highest amounts, they do vary. And some that get a little too much, it triggers a problem. And this goes back to really human adaptation. So humans adapted to 2 different ecological niches. One was close to the ocean, and one was far from the ocean. A lot of humans did spend time fishing, gathering shellfish and seafood and a lot of sea vegetables as well. And other humans migrated more inland, and they were quite a ways away from seawater. So iodine is a nutrient that is a powerful thing. It creates free radical damage in slight excesses. So those who were more coastal, they had to have mechanisms that allowed them to be protected against occasional surges, occasions of getting a lot of iodine. And on the opposite side, those who were more inland, they needed mechanisms that let them, scour and hold on to every speck they got, because they didn't always get a lot. So, but you can't have both. You can be protected against a lot, or you can do well in times of there being just too little. But you can't have both. So the gene variations reflect differences in these iodine regulating enzymes. And people that have the predominant enzyme types that allow them to do well in a low iodine environment, they become harmed when they're exposed to even a slight excess.
So let me see if I can understand this right and regurgitate it, and you correct me if I'm wrong here. So it sounds like you said, mainland people maybe had less iodine, so they needed to be able to retain it. People who are more coastal usually had more iodine, so they could take on more. And so if you have more iodine and you're able to sustain more, does that leave you more susceptible to hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism?
Nick, that's an awesome question. And this opens up something that is just one of the many mind-blowing, non-intuitive things about thyroid disease. The answer is yes. So the answer is that either end of the extreme can lead to the same sets of problems. So yeah, way too little or way too much can cause hyperthyroid cancer, nodules, goiters. You can have those on either end. And the reason that there's a paradox is that when there's too much iodine, what happens is, imagine you got the wiring for your house, like now I got the lights on and whatnot, and like a 50 amp fuse. So if you plugged in way too much current in there, you blow a fuse, right? And that keeps the house from burning down. Your body's got the same thing when it comes to iodine getting into your thyroid. You got a fuse. So if you get way too much, you blow a fuse. Because of that simple reason, a lot of iodine causes the exact same problems that too little iodine does, because you blow the fuse and there's none getting in.
Man, so I know that a big thing that you talk about is people who have thyroid issues, oftentimes they get immediately treated with medication, but you talk about how so much of thyroid issues can be repaired or completely eliminated by lifestyle and by diet in particular. I mean, your book is called The Thyroid Reset Diet. So talk to us a little bit about what that looks like, I guess, from both extents. If you have hypothyroidism, hyperthyroidism, and then is it the same? Is it opposite for those people? Talk to us a little bit about what that kind of thyroid reset diet actually looks like.
For sure, yeah. So the circumstance is that I mentioned how thyroid meds are the most widely prescribed meds. In the irrefutable medical literature, there's been strong position papers saying that somewhere around 85 to 90% of people on these medications have no business being on these medications. There's something off with their thyroid, yes. And we often assume that if a hormone in the body does X, like if thyroid hormone helps us regulate our body weight, it's tempting to assume that therefore, if we were to ingest thyroid hormone from outside the body, we would get the same effect. And the one doesn't follow the other. I think about hormones like the depth of the ocean. There's so much going on behind the scenes. We can read blood hormone levels. We know that this hormone has this role, but there's some things that we know about that we can't really measure clinically, like the way that genes interact with hormones, the way that hormone receptors can change, the way that cell permeability can change. So those are the known unknowns. If we're thinking about the ocean, the blood levels might be the first inch, and these known unknowns might be a few more feet. But there's thousands of feet of unknown unknowns. So taking a pill, even if the pill has the exact same thing the body makes, it's not the same as the body making it, right? And that's where the problem comes in. So people have abnormal thyroid levels. And I got to say, if their levels are in where they are in just a few percent of thyroid patients, to where they just quit, there's nothing coming out, say their thyroid was removed. Yeah, the meds are life-saving. They need that. But for so many other people, the problem isn't that something is missing. The problem is the body is not regulating it right, that there's an inflammatory response. And so when you throw meds on top of that, there may be some benefit here and there, but there's tons of risks associated with that. Now, that's the condition of the meds. Simultaneously, there have been now some big studies saying that simple dietary change has a chance of fully reversing this for the majority of people. Per this category and per the severity, that might be 60 or 70% of people can fully reverse this in a few months by dietary change.
Wow. And so what do those dietary changes need to look like, depending on obviously which kind of end of the spectrum you're on?
Yeah, so what inspired this work was studies on short-term uses of extreme low iodine diets. And those are done for a few months at a time. Now, many people take a little longer to get full benefit. So I took that layer, but I also added in a lot of other things known about the things that optimize thyroid function, things that are good for health longer term, like the balance of your macronutrients, your protein, fat, carb ratios. If those things are way off in some way, your body may be overfueled, but still thinking that it's starving. And that can screw up things for the thyroid. There's also a lot of key essential micronutrients that we need to get, not just to regulate. Things like selenium or iron or zinc or vitamin A. So I wanted a diet rich in those. And lastly, there's so many really cool phytonutrients that help our body's immune system, our detox pathways, and do useful things to benefit thyroid function. So the Thyroid Reset Diet, it dials in iodine pretty painlessly, but then it makes sure that you've got a nice balance of macros for general health and good thyroid function. And then you've got all the other critical things that make it all work better.
If you wouldn't mind giving us a few of those examples, the selenium, vitamin A, what were some of those micronutrients that you said were pretty critical?
Yeah, iron, zinc, those are the top few. Yeah,
Okay.
ultimately, every part of your body needs everything, but those are ones that are most central and also ones that are commonly low in the populations at question.
So those are micronutrients are obviously found in specific foods, but also a lot of micronutrients are things that people can take as supplements now. And you mentioned before how if you get like injected with thyroid hormone, like naturally you think like, oh, this is going to work because you're deficient in that. Now you're getting a hormone, but it's not the same as you actually getting it some other way and kind of going back to the root of the cause. Is that similar to these types of supplements? Like, is it more beneficial to get these micronutrients from food itself than it is from like a zinc supplement per se?
It's a funny thing. I'm glad you asked that one. Over the years, my views have evolved a lot on this. And I don't know, there's a lot of evidence for both being relevant, and it's very specific to which nutrient we're talking about. So in the case of selenium, for example, there's evidence that some studies on selenium being of benefit only show benefit in populations that are low in selenium going into it. Others show benefits to dietary intake, and some show benefits of supplemental intake independent of one's selenium status. To a point, you can't take too much. So sometimes micronutrients are simply making up for deficiency. Sometimes they're kind of like gentle medications that work in ways onto their own. And having said all that, there's no replacement for a good diet.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. I think that's good to hear. Right. And one of the things that I just preach to everybody when it comes to health is usually it's not a one size fits all approach. Everything requires context, right? It's not like that the supplement is the best way necessarily, or maybe the diet is the best way necessarily. It's like each can maybe work for different individuals. So that's always really important to keep top of mind. I think one of the things I'm interested in is like, I started off by naming some of the symptoms that people might experience if they have thyroid issues, things like weight gain, hair loss, fatigue. Those are also just kind of very general things that people could experience. So if I'm listening to that and I'm like weight gain, fatigue, hair loss, I might be experiencing that, but how the heck do I know if it's from a thyroid issue or something else? Like, how does somebody know, maybe without getting tested and then with getting tested, whether or not they have thyroid issues?
Well, there's no definitive way without getting tested, but it's more suspicious if there's a certain timing to those symptoms. If there's symptoms that seem to come on after a point in time you could point to, that's a little more suspicious. And funny thing, some studies quantified symptoms both in a static and a dynamic way, meaning weight gain or more weight gain. And the distinction is that some people have glitches they struggled with forever. And yeah, a zillion things could cause that. But if this is something that, yeah, I used to work out well and eat well, but ever since last November, now it's just going up and my normal stuff isn't working. That's more of a red flag. So a little more nuance to that for sure. And then also we think about the symptoms. There's symptoms that can be present, but then we often wonder, but what if I don't have that symptom? Like you mentioned the top three, they're just classic top three. And most people don't have all three. It's kind of odd, but there's about a dozen really big symptoms, and most people statistically have between 1 and 3 of those dozen symptoms. So a lot of folks hear this and they think, yeah, my weight is fine. It can't be my thyroid. It must be something else. And that's not how it works. I imagine like a deck of 12 cards, everybody gets dealt a couple cards, but you don't get all of them.
If some of the causes is genetic, obviously some of the other causes, lifestyle and things like that, at what point, at what age do people usually start to experience thyroid issues? And like, what's the thing that they've done repeatedly that has ended up leading to that?
Yeah, awesome question. So like some things, it's just more common with age, so each decade in life, but there's a real high rate of it getting much more common at times of hormonal change. Now, both genders get thyroid disease. There's tons of guys out there with thyroid disease, but it's about 6 to 10 times more common in women. And it seems that there's some interplay between estrogen and thyroid metabolism. And also some of the genes are more apt to be X-linked. As guys, we got one X chromosome, women have two. So they get twice the odds that way. So yeah, so it can come on at any time, but entering into perimenopause or menopause, that's a real big time for that. Before, after pregnancy is a big one as well. So those are some of the most suspicious windows.
And so with that being said, if I'm listening to this and I know that those are suspicious windows, are there things that I can do leading into those times that I can help to prevent thyroid issues from occurring?
It's a funny thing, but there have been so many studies about the causes of thyroid disease. And one of the recent ones delineated more than 400 different things that may contribute to the disease. But when they wrapped it all up, they said there's basically, 4 factors. There's age, genetics, gender, and iodine. Now, if you think that through, age, genetics, and gender, you can't do much about those 3.
Right.
So
Right.
that leaves us here. Now, I talked about micronutrients. Selenium is a special one in that category. And the reason selenium is special is because it helps our iodine buffering. So the extent to which we've got a window of iodine tolerance, if we're low on selenium, that window is even narrower. So the 2 biggest things we can do if we're concerned about that or suspecting it or a family history are avoiding just the overload ridiculous sources of iodine and making sure we're doing well on our selenium intake.
So is it usually an overconsumption of iodine that's causing the issues? Is that what I think that's what you had said previously?
It's a funny thing. If we're talking about changing our historical context or our geographic context, if we went back to prior 1992 and prior, there was 112 countries on the earth categorized as severely iodine deficient. The US was not one of those. By 2014, that number went down to 0, but there's now 53 countries categorized as at risk for thyroid disease due to iodine excess. So iodine deficiency does happen. It's not that it's an impossible thing, but as far as documented cases in America, we've had 6 in the last 40 years. So it's pretty dang rare. And then in terms of iodine excess, studies have shown that per age, gender, demographic, about 30 to 40% of the population is at an iodine intake that can be a problem for those genetically prone to thyroid disease.
And so for people that are listening who are going to be too lazy to go and look up foods that are maybe super high in iodine, what are some examples of foods that are super high in iodine that, maybe could lead to excess iodine if consumed over and over again?
Yeah, the biggest ones, the first thing I start with is supplements. A lot of them have it and it just doesn't really need to be there. Even pregnant women, the most conservative medical review groups have said there's no net benefit to iodine supplementation in the modern world, for even for pregnant women. So you just don't need it in supplements. That's the easiest spot. What's in supplements is pretty much never what's labeled to have. The quality control is very poor because of the chemistry of iodine. Next up is sea vegetables. These aren't a big part of everyone's diet, but they're so concentrated in iodine that it's tough to stay stable with them in there. Easy one is salt. So a lot of salt is fortified with iodine. A lot of salt that's not fortified has tons of naturally occurring iodine. So I love clean salts, like kosher salts. I used to think about, I don't know, nothing bad. I wouldn't say this even. I used to like sea salt. I used to think there's a lot of benefit to it, but it's not really a vitamin. Yes, there are some good nutrients in sea salt, but the amounts are meaningless. Like potassium. There's potassium in sea salt. if you consume 10,000 servings a day, you get your RDA for potassium. You can't do that. That's not a reliable source of it. Same story for other nutrients. 90% of sea salt and pink Himalayan salt is now contaminated with microplastics. And we've got toxic heavy metals as well. So yeah, I love salt, just pure simple salt. And that's an easy way to get it and avoid the iodine. It's not even a sodium issue. So that's salt. Yeah, the last 30 years, thyroid disease has gone out of control. And two food categories, we eat more of those food categories, and there's more iodine in those food categories. And that's processed grain products and dairy foods. Now, this isn't a story about gluten, and it's not a story about grains across the board. It's about baked stuff we buy from the store. Iodine is used in a lot of ways as a commercial additive, in ways that don't always show up on the label. And then kind of a similar problem with dairy foods. It's used more and more as a teat sanitizer. Also, fish meal is a cheap protein given to cows, and it's often fortified with cow meal as well. So they just get too much, it ends up in our milk. Past that, think about egg yolks, wonderful foods. And I want to pause and say, I encourage short-term close regulation of iodine. I don't want people to avoid these things forever. Once they've fixed something, there's a maintenance plan that adds a lot of these things back in. So yeah, that's another one for short term. And then the last one is being really thoughtful about seafood. So seafood has so many health benefits. Many types just have enough that's unsafe for those trying to reverse thyroid disease. Freshwater fish, some versions of shellfish are lower. But again, once the acute work is done, you get more options back.
Right. So I think a lot of these things are things that people would potentially think is maybe healthy, right? Like egg yolks, seafood, sea vegetables. I guess like more like maybe some grains, like maybe even Himalayan pink salt and sea salt. A lot of people think there's benefits to that. Should I completely avoid it? Probably the answer is not like completely avoid. It's like anything. If you just like, if that is just 100% of your diet, then it's probably going to be a little bit too high in iodine, right?
My thought process about diets, I've used the word reset a lot. I started a long time ago with that word. And there's good things you can do when you're trucking along and feeling well and things are fine. But when you got to fix something, sometimes it's different. Like Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, right? And
Yeah.
glue, you might need glue to put them together, but a seatbelt might have kept him from falling. So it's different. So once you've fallen and cracked your thyroid, you got to do something different for the reset. And that's not what you'd have to do forever. And you wouldn't have to do that even to keep your thyroid stable. But yeah, sometimes you got to do strategies short term in ways that are different and deliberate for a specific purpose.
Gotcha. I want to go back to the salt thing just because I'm interested. I've been using Himalayan pink salt thinking that's like, there's nothing bad about it. So what salt do you use? And again, like further explain why that's the recommendation.
Yeah. So in terms of thyroid function, in terms of iodine content, there aren't a lot of assays on iodine things in general. It's hard to find a lot of detail. I've scoured for all that I can. I've seen conflicting assays for iodine content for pink Himalayan salt, but most suggest that it has about twice the iodine as iodized salt. Now, salt, you can think about it as purified or dug up, basically. And if you dig up the dirt, you get all the minerals found in the Earth's crust. And there was this argument like that was somehow we needed to get all these obscure things. And a lot of them we do, a lot of trace minerals we do need. But the drawback about mining salt or just taking it from the ground or even just drying it from the ocean is that you're also getting minerals you don't want. So cadmium, arsenic, lead, mercury. If you look at assays on these products, they're there. There's no secret to that. And these are non-essential things that really have no healthy threshold. So the argument about including it because you're getting nutrients, you're getting toxins too. And the nutrients you are getting are just not in therapeutic amounts. Magnesium is probably the single one closest to being useful. But even then, if you're getting all like a healthy day's intake of salt, that's a normal intake of sea salt or Himalayan salt, you're going to get like 10 milligrams of magnesium or so. It's not a game changer. And every other nutrient past that, you get down to where it is thousands of servings a day to make a difference. So yeah, salt's just not a multivitamin. I think about salt as a flavor enhancer, part of cooking. Pretty much all the top chefs love Diamond brand kosher salt. They don't pay me, but the shape of the crystals works really well in the kitchen. And the ingredient is salt. There's like nothing else there. There's no microplastics, no additives, no heavy metals, no preservatives. It's really cool stuff.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I want to go back to one thing. You stressed the importance of selenium when it comes to iodine buffering. what is it? What exactly does that mean? What function does selenium serve like inside of our body to help buffer iodine levels?
Yeah, I grew up in the 70s, and pinball was a big thing. You got the balls going around, you want to keep it in play, it moves here, it moves there. So
Yeah.
that's what a lot of nutrients do in the body. And so selenium changes how thyroid hormones circulate, whether they go into the right places, whether they get broke down properly. This is a group of enzymes called deiodinase enzymes, and they remove and attach iodine, and they're selenium dependent. Now, I mentioned iodine is a source of free radicals. So think about like hydrogen peroxide or bleach, things that make it foam and turn white, and they sanitize your skin. So iodine's in that category. So when your body uses iodine, it's having to wade through tons of free radicals. And so it needs its own antioxidants. So glutathione, superoxide dismutase are a couple of the body's most important antioxidants, and they're especially critical within the thyroid. These are all selenium-dependent antioxidants. So even a minor deficiency of selenium, they can't be made quite as well. So we need it to protect against the damage from the iodine, and we need it to regulate iodine in circulation.
Gotcha. Getting down towards the end here, Dr. Christianson, if somebody has hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism or something like Hashimoto's and Graves', and they start to implement a lot of the things that you teach to help correct those issues, how long does it usually take for somebody to start implementing the right habits until they start to see a difference and feel a difference? And how do they also kind of like know that it's working? Is it just like maybe they start to lose weight, maybe they start to have more energy, maybe their hair starts falling out? Again, kind of how long does it take, and what's the recognition that yes, this is working?
Yeah, great questions. So how long does it take? The body's pretty quick at fixing itself. That's a cool thing. And the duration, this is a fun thing that you can use in everything you do. So the duration that it takes to change is a function of how long it takes for those cells to turn over. So we have chemical changes and structural changes. So chemical changes are fast. Once your body, when someone's exercising better and sleeping better, they can have immediate changes to their mood. So yeah, that's a positive, quick chemical change. Now, structural change is always slower, and that's a rate at how quickly those cells repair. So slowest can be like brain cells or bone cells or hair follicles. That can be a matter of months or a year or more, But things like skin cells or gut lining, those are much quicker. So the duration is just about how long the body takes for a chemical change or a structural change. Now, how do you know? Well, there's two populations we're speaking to. There's those who are not sure if they have thyroid disease or not, and those who know they do, and they're probably on medication. So different audiences. Medication is such a big thing. One study I read said that those who do functional natural medicine, of that population, 84% has been diagnosed with thyroid disease and 60% has been put on thyroid medication. So if you go to natural practitioners, they mean well, but they often over-medicate, as do conventional practitioners. So when you're on thyroid meds, it can take a little more involvement, because even if your thyroid gets better, you don't always see it because the meds may be preventing that. So we'll put them aside for a moment. So the other people, yeah, if you've got some vague thyroid symptoms, they're not too catastrophic, they get better, that's cool. The duration might just be 3 months, and you could then do more of a maintenance plan. If you have measurable changes or clear thyroid disease that's not on medication, it's pretty rare to take more than 3 months to see a positive change in the right direction, and rare to take more than 9 months for a full reversal of the problem.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love the explanation between a chemical change and a functional change, and just the description of how fast it takes for certain cells or things to turn over. That's just it makes it so simple to think about the timeline of correction or the timeline of improvement of certain things.
Well, I want to say just to your audience too, I love the work that you're doing. What you're doing is the most powerful medicine we've got. So I just want to own that, put that out there. And to your audience, this is something that, as your fitness, your body's fuel metabolism, your overall energy output, there have been specific clinical trials on those with thyroid disease or with thyroid symptoms. Exercise is powerful medicine. And you can fully reverse problems in many cases by that. If you're also doing helpful chemical nutritional things, so be it. But a lot of folks out there, yeah, that's huge. And then many think that if they have some hormone problem, they're frightened to exercise. They think exercise is bad for them. It's going to like be too much or set them back. I'm like, well, you could be dumb and overdo it out of the gate for sure. But if you're reasonably working up, there's nothing better you can do to improve your health.
I guess to kind of, just because you brought it up here, when it comes to hormones and exercise, it is a pretty common topic that people, if you're over exercising, your hormones are going to be out of whack. Is that a factor of people over exercising compared to normal for them? Because like for me, right, I could work out maybe hard 7 times a week, whereas somebody else might work out hard 7 times a week, and our hormones are completely different. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of different reasons for that, but is one big reason just simply like what your body is normally used to?
I'm so happy we can talk about this. I'd love to go deep in this one, as deep as you want, but I see a lot of folks online who mean well, and they put a message out that any kind of exercise, cardio, this kind, you're going to completely wreck your health. You're going to damage all this stuff. And there's been so much data on how athletes, their risk of chronic disease, how they age, how they do long term. It's a pretty cut and dry story, Nick. There's no hidden bodies out there. One study pulled together at least about 1,000 different epidemiologic studies and looked at the effect of different types of training on longevity. And they even mapped that out in terms of hours per week of training. And basically, when you're exercising more, your longevity, both health span and lifespan, how long you live and how well you live, they improve, they get longer. Now, somewhere around, let me get these numbers right in my head. Yeah, it was somewhere around 12 hours a week. The steep curve of greater benefit gets to be less of a steep curve. But they went out in this study to about like 35 hours per week of exercise. And there wasn't a point at where the death risk got higher in the exercise population versus the non-exercise population. So the important thing to understand is that exercise is hormesis. It is a stressor on the body, and it's a good stressor, but it's got to be a dose appropriate stressor. So yeah, if you took me and put me on Eliud Kipchoge's training routine for, I wouldn't make it a month. But if you took someone else and had them do that much, that would be perfect for them. So you're right, but how much we do, it's not static. As we train, we tolerate more and we thrive under more and we do better with more. So yeah, there's no better evidence for any intervention for overall health or health span or lifespan than good regular exercise.
Yeah, and just for the sake of time, I don't want to go too terribly far, but I do have one more kind of question on this. The word hormesis is a lot of people might not know that, but essentially a good stressor on the body. And essentially, like while you're doing exercise, if you were tested for certain hormone levels, like in the midst of exercise, then they would be off the charts and like not healthy at all, right? But then by the time after you've exercised, they've come back down to more regular.
Cortisol has been looked at quite a bit, and cortisol gets brought up quite a bit as something that if you train too much, your cortisol gets disrupted. And you're right, in the moment is different than chronic and static. One of the biggest studies that caused a lot of fear was a study on marathoners, and it was saying that people who were doing marathons had higher rates of respiratory illnesses, and that's because their cortisol shut down their immune system. And this one got so much traction and created, I think, was a big part of being behind a lot of those fears. But what they failed to take into account was the fact that they didn't take into account the rate of infections comparing exercisers against other people who were also traveling and being around large crowds of people. So if you look at people who travel to a marathon and are around a lot of people compared to someone that goes to Disneyland, right? So the folks that go to like large entertainment events, like large parks, have way more respiratory infections than people who go to competitive events do. So it wasn't the fact they trained hard, it was the fact that they goofed up their schedule. They were around hundreds of other icky, slimy, infected humans, and they caught something. That's all.
Yeah, that's just one of the frustrating things is, right, like so many times when things get reported, things get looked at in somewhat of a vacuum and greater context isn't considered. And so I just appreciate you bringing up another example of that. When people are taking in information or see headlines and stuff like that, you got to make sure you don't just always take it at surface level. And sometimes you got to dive a little bit deeper to really get to the truth of the issue. But Dr. Christianson, this has been absolutely awesome. Before I get to the last episode, I just want to acknowledge you for the work that you've done. I know that from your childhood and kind of early adulthood, health has been something that hasn't necessarily come all that easy to you, and you've done a lot of work on yourself to get to the point to where you are today, where you go out and do a run in negative 19-degree weather, and health and fitness is such a big part of your life, and to give that back to everybody is so cool to learn about, and I'm excited to continue to take in more of your content and learn more about you and everything that you do, and I know everybody else is as well.
Well, again, you're doing a great job with lots of folks. I think it's a wonderful thing.
Well, I appreciate it. You guys need to make sure you go get the Thyroid Reset Diet. I'll make sure I have it linked up in the show notes as well. But the Thyroid Reset Diet, you need to make sure you go follow him on Instagram as well at Dr. Alan Christianson. But other than that, Dr. Christianson, last question is a hypothetical question. Is if you could only do 3 healthy habits for the rest of your life, for whatever reason you weren't able to do all the different healthy habits that you would like to do, but you could choose 3 healthy habits that you'd like to do the rest of your life, what are those 3 that you'd choose?
It's a tricky one. Yeah, I'm thinking about when I've had to compromise things here and there.
Yeah.
Boy, sleep, exercise, community, diet. Oh, 3 of those. Which one would I compromise? I'm not sure if I got that one. Boy, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Hey,
I
you
have to
gave
get
us
back to
4.
you on that, Nick. I don't know which of those 4 I could drop.
That's great. Hey, I mean, sleep, exercise, community, diet. I love it. That's great. Well, I know everybody learned a lot today. I know me personally, I feel like, obviously I'm no master at it. That's you, but I feel like I've learned a whole lot more around thyroid issues, around what causes it, how to reverse it, how to fix it. And if people need more ammo on that sort of thing, then go get the Thyroid Reset Diet. But Dr. Christianson, that's all we got today. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
While I can't say I'm an expert on thyroid health now, man, I do feel like I know a whole lot more than I did going in. And I do know that thyroid issues have only been on the rise, so I'm glad I know a little bit more about it now, and I'm super interested in learning more. If you're a former athlete who struggles to prioritize their health and fitness and you need an at-home workout program that gets you results, then try the 1-week free trial of the 10-week transformation. You'll get free workouts and free recipes for a full week, and you'll see if the program is a good fit for you. Opt in today at nickcarrier.com/free trial. Again, nickcarrier.com/free trial. Some of my biggest takeaways from Dr. Christianson today were the following. The cause of thyroid issues is largely genetic, but that doesn't mean that you're destined to them or that they're irreversible. There are plenty of things that you can do to help minimize your chances and reverse the issues if you start to experience them. Thyroid health is all about having the right amounts of iodine in your body, and the amount of iodine that is right for you is different from what's right for me, and we're all unique in our iodine needs. Foods that are high in iodine are not good or bad, all of us just needs the right amount. So understanding this can really make it sure that you don't overconsume or underconsume, and it can help you reverse thyroid diseases if you ever get them. Also, thyroid issues most of the time don't need medication, says Dr. Alan Christianson, and it can be reversed in a matter of months with the right dosage of iodine and micronutrients like selenium. I hope learning about thyroid health was interesting to you, and it will benefit you on your health and fitness journey. Now, go out there and continue your healthy habits so you can continue to get closer and closer to your best you.